My mother wept in the witness box, saying I owed them my life, but when I handed the scholarship letter with my name on it to the judge, her whole story fell apart and the trial completely changed. I'm 25, a software developer in Austin, and after years of hard work, I finally bought my first property, a small 2-bedroom duplex, but mine at last. No roommates, no landlords. All that sacrifice was worth it. She had spent 3 years living frugally to save up for the down payment. One night, while she was eating Chinese food on the sofa, the doorbell rang. I went to open the door, expecting anything but what I received, a court officer with an envelope in his hand. "Daniel Romero?" he asked. I nodded. "You have been notified." I signed the receipt, thinking it was some silly thing from the Residents Association. But as soon as I opened the envelope, I felt like the world stopped. A lawsuit for damages. Carlos and Marta Romero versus Daniel Romero. My own parents were suing me for $67,847, plus interest, legal fees, and compensation for emotional distress. They claimed I had fraudulently obtained student loans in their names and that I had unjustly enriched myself. They wanted me to return every last penny of what they supposedly spent on my education. And if I didn't, they threatened to garnish my wages and even take my house. I had 20 days to respond or I would lose everything. I read the papers over and over. I couldn't believe it. My parents never mentioned taking out loans for me. They always said they would help me and that I shouldn't worry about the details, because family supports each other. But what finally broke the camel's back was the addendum to the lawsuit, a meticulous breakdown of every expense since 2018. Tuition, room and board, books, even the meal plan. All, according to them, financed by loans I had agreed to repay. But I never knew about any of that. I never signed it, I never authorized it. It was always presented to me as an act of love, an investment in my future. And now they were labeling me an ungrateful person who refused to pay. My own parents decided to attack me without a prior conversation, without a warning. Nothing. Just a direct legal blow to the heart of my stability. Just as I was trying to process everything, I got a text from my best friend. "Tomas, wanna grab a drink tonight? I want to see your new bachelor pad." I replied, "Another time." My parents just sued me. She called me from. What? They sued you for college money? I nodded silently. This is beyond anything. You need a lawyer. Now. Tomas has known my parents since high school. He's the only friend who's seen how they manipulate, how they always hide their true intentions behind a friendly facade. Most people think that, because they're family, there's affection. He knows that doesn't apply in my case. I know a lawyer who studied with me. He told me, Lucia Mendez. She's relentless and owes me a favor. I'll call her. 20 minutes later, Lucia texted me. Tomas explained it to me. This smells like blackmail. You can come tomorrow at 2. I slept very little that night. I replayed every conversation I'd had with my parents about money for college. And the more I thought about it, the more suspicious their behavior seemed, how they changed the subject, and I tried to thank them, how uncomfortable they became if I mentioned paying them back someday. I used to think it was war. Now, I suspect it was a cover-up. This morning, I only had one clear idea: if they wanted war, they'd get it. But first, I needed to understand how it all started. When I was 18, getting into Harvard wasn't just a dream, it was a part of me. I lived to study. My grades were solid, 1540 on the SAT, perfect GPA, acceptable extracurricular activities. I wasn't a star, but I had merit. I applied early on. All I cared about was Harvard. The acceptance email arrived one afternoon in December, while I was in advanced chemistry class. I saw the congratulations notification from Harvard University and almost screamed with excitement. I literally ran home. I screamed, I got accepted to Harvard. But her reaction was strange. My mother, Marta, didn't even look up from her laptop. That's great, darling, he said, as if I were telling him I got a good grade in biology. My father, Carlos, was in his office surrounded by financial papers. He took off his glasses and rubbed his temples, his usual gesture for delivering bad news. "It's an achievement, son, but we need to talk seriously about money." They sat me down at the table. He took out the calculator. She started adding up expenses: tuition, room and board, health insurance, transportation, emergency fund, books, even money for laundry. "Daniel," my mother said, "Harvard is an honor, but your scholarship only covers 60% of the costs. There's a big gap." That figure, 60%, is etched in my mind. My father added, "We can't afford a debt like that. And we don't want you burdened with endless payments." What I didn't know was that they had already seen all the documentation. They knew I had a 97% scholarship, but they faked a crisis to derail me. They made me believe that the only reasonable option was something else. Mom insisted, "Harvard is full of rich kids. You'll feel out of place. At a state university, you'll be able to stand out." They offered me the chance to go to Texas State University, live at home, and save money. "We'll figure this out together," my father said. And so, that day, sitting in the kitchen, my dreams vanished. But the worst part wasn't the rejection, it was the guilt. I felt like I was forcing them into debt. I muttered, "Okay, Ute, it's okay." But the story doesn't end there. A year later, already in my second year, my older brother, Julian, who had just graduated high school with a 2.8 GPA, announced that he would be attending a prestigious business school in Colorado. Tuition, room, and board included. "And how are they paying for that?" I asked, puzzled. "I thought we were doing all right." My father puffed out his chest as if he'd just closed the best deal of his life. "Your mother and I have greatly improved our financial situation." They decided it was time to invest in Julian's future. According to them, he had entrepreneurial potential that they couldn't afford to miss. "Sometimes you have to take calculated risks," my father used to say. I would look at them in silence, unable to believe what I was hearing. A year ago they told me they couldn't cover my expenses at Harvard, but now it turns out they can pay $40,000 a year for the average man to attend business school. Julian smiled at me from across the table. "Not everyone is cut out for the gamble, little brother. The real money is in business," he said condescendingly. This is the same guy who once asked me if Alaska was a country or a state. For the next 3 years, I felt like a second-class citizen in my own home. While I struggled to finish my engineering degree at UDT, working part-time at Best Buy to cover my expenses, Julian was off to ski resorts and fraternity parties, documenting everything on Instagram. Everything was paid for with my parents' money. Every family dinner became a tribute to his exploits. "Did you see Julian's spring break photo?" my mother would say, delighted. He was networking with some very successful people. Meanwhile, I was trying to concentrate on studying thermodynamics, with the TV blaring in the next room because my father refused to turn it down. Even so, I had to be grateful for his support. I graduated with honors in 2022 and landed a great job right out of college. The day after my lease was approved, I packed my bags and moved out. I thought leaving their house meant closing that chapter, but I was wrong. That lawsuit made it clear they had been harboring resentment for years, waiting for the perfect moment to collect what they believed she owed them. Meeting Lucia Mendez was like bringing a rocket launcher to a knife fight. A lawyer with a steady gaze and an implacable attitude, she seemed capable of legally destroying anyone before noon and still having time for a Pilates class. I met her at a downtown coffee shop. I slid the lawsuit document across the table, feeling like someone about to confess that their family deserved to be on a reality TV show. Lucia read it once, then again more carefully. Her face shifted from a neutral expression to intense concentration. "Parent plus loans," she finally murmured. "Legally, those loans are the responsibility of the borrower, that is, your parents. They can't sue you for payment unless there's a signed contract where you agree to cover that debt. And even then, they'd have to prove unjust enrichment or fraud on your part." She leaned back in her chair, almost amused. "Daniel, this lawsuit has no legal basis whatsoever. which tells me that either they're desperate or they received very bad legal advice. I didn't know anything about it, I told him. They never mentioned loans. They said they were helping me. Parents don't sue their children without a strong reason. There's something else here, maybe an economic crisis or something they haven't told you. Lucia paused thoughtfully, tapping her pen against her notebook. Tell me everything you remember about your financial aid experience in college. I told her everything, from the Harvard acceptance letter and the conversation in the kitchen where they said they would only partially cover my tuition, to the mysterious funding from Julian's business school. When I finished, Lucia looked at me seriously. Did you ever see the financial aid documents yourself? The official Harvard document? That question hit me like a slap in the face. I was about to reply, but I stopped. An image flashed through my mind, my parents, reading my acceptance email while I, overcome with emotion, didn't even bother to check the details. No, I realized. They took care of everything. I just trusted them. We need to get those documents. If your parents lied about the aid package, this lawsuit could be considered fraud. He took out his phone and started taking notes. Let's do the following. First, we're filing a countersuit for intentional emotional distress. Second, we're legally requesting all of their financial records from the last decade. If they've been playing games with the money, we're going to find out. That sharp smile returned. They didn't think you'd fight back. Many in your place would pay the price in silence to avoid a family scandal. But they chose the wrong son. That's when Tomas, who had been silent the whole time, spoke up. Hey, do you remember your Uncle Ernesto? Years ago he said something strange about your university admission. My Uncle Ernesto, my father's younger brother, is his complete opposite. While Dad is methodical and reserved, Ernesto is relaxed and direct. He was also the only one in the family who never seemed to play along with my parents. What did he say? Lucia asked. Something about being proud that I succeeded on my own, despite having opportunities that not everyone has. At the time, it seemed like a strange comment, but perhaps he knew something. We need to talk to him. That same night I called Ernesto. He answered on the second ring. How's everything going with your new place, Daniel? Good, man. But I need to ask you something a little strange. Do you remember saying that at university I had opportunities that others didn't? Silence. Then why are you asking that? My parents are suing me. They say I owe them student loan money. Ernesto exploded. I knew this day would come. Daniel, your father was always bragging to everyone about the scholarship you got at Harvard. He said it covered almost all the expenses and that they wouldn't have to pay much at all. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. Almost all of it? Yes, son. I'm sorry, I thought you knew that and that you'd simply chosen UD for another reason. If I had known they lied to you, would you have been willing to testify about it? Of course. I hung up. Lucia was already typing frantically. This is good. Family testimony shows they knew about the substantial aid. But we need official proof. And how do we get them? Let's go to Harvard. We'll ask for your real financial records. Tomas smiled. A trip to Boston? For the first time since I received the lawsuit, I felt I wasn't alone. I had a tenacious lawyer, a friend who wouldn't let go of my hand, and an uncle willing to expose the lies. It was time to find out what they had really stolen from me. Lucia wasted no time. While I was grappling with the pain of the betrayal, she was already erecting a legal wall. Her first move was to formally respond to my parents' lawsuit, telling the lawyer in the case, Mr. Gutierrez, with the utmost professional courtesy, that his argument was untenable. Then came the most complicated part, getting Harvard to release its 7-year-old files. University bureaucracy is almost impenetrable, Lucia told me, but faced with a legitimate request and in the midst of an active legal process, they have no choice. They will have to cooperate. Lucia Mendez drafted a formal letter to Harvard's financial aid office. In it, she meticulously detailed the situation and requested my complete academic and financial records. It was an impeccable document, carefully structured with polite language, though imbued with a subtle yet forceful legal pressure. While we waited for Harvard's response, I decided to investigate on my own. Just then, Uncle Ernesto called me with a suggestion. "Daniel, your father keeps bragging about his investment portfolio. He spends his time posting screenshots of his earnings on Facebook. Maybe you'll find something useful there." And he was right. My father was one of those people who think they're financial experts just because they had a lucky few stock market trades. His profile was full of posts where, with false modesty, he talked about his investments and advice. I started reviewing his history and went back to 2018, when I started university. Most of it was the typical posts of an older person, articles criticizing young people, photos of his golf games, and complaints about taxes. However, I found something that caught my attention. It was a post from September 2018, right after my first month at Harvard. It said something like, "Sometimes the best investments are the ones you don't anticipate. Patience pays off. Grateful for the smart decisions." And he attached an image of what appeared to be a brokerage account with a deposit of $47,000, dated August 15, 2018, 2 weeks before the start of classes. I took a screenshot and immediately sent it to Lucia. Her response was clear: this could be proof of financial fraud. They used your scholarship to invest while claiming they had no money. The next day, Lucia received a call from Harvard. They had found my records, but there was a problem. They could only deliver them directly to me with the proper documentation, signed before a notary. "Looks like you're going to have to make that trip after all," she told me. Tomas and I set off for Boston that weekend. It was a 22-hour journey that we split into 2 days, with one night in a rather shady motel in Pennsylvania, where the Wi-Fi password was literally 123. The Harvard Financial Aid office building was imponent, an intimidating Gothic structure designed to make you feel out of place. However, the administrator who assisted us, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Salazar, was very understanding when she heard the case. "This isn't usual," she commented, as she accessed my file. "But considering there's a legal process involved, we can provide you with certified copies of the original documents." He printed several papers and slid them across the desk toward me. I hesitated for a moment before looking, but there it was. On official Harvard letterhead, Daniel Romero was announced as the recipient of a comprehensive financial aid package consisting of merit scholarships, a need-based grant, and a work-study program that covers 97% of tuition, room, board, and university fees for 4 academic years. Family contribution, $3,200 annually. Total estimated value of aid, $274,000. 97%. My family was only required to contribute $3,200 a year, less than what I spent on books and transportation at the state university. I stared at the document, my hands trembling. Tomas glanced over my shoulder and let out a whistle. "They didn't just lie to you, brother. They stole your entire future." Dr. Salazar noticed my expression and spoke to me gently. "I'm sorry you have to face this, Mr. Romero. I know it's difficult news. I was told they would only cover 60%. I managed to reply. They assured me they couldn't pay the rest. Your assistance package was exceptional, they explained. You could have finished college with very little debt, maybe $12,000 total. The return to Austin was mostly quiet. I was trying to come to terms with the fact that my parents hadn't just favored Julian, but had actively ruined my future to fund his. They had stolen nearly $300,000 from me on several occasions and then had the nerve to sue me for money they never invested in me. But beyond the anger, I felt something unexpected: relief. I finally had proof. Finally, I had something to defend myself with. Lucia greeted us upon our return, and when she saw the Harvard documents, her smile was more like that of a predator than a lawyer. "Daniel," she told me, "we're not just going to win this lawsuit, we're going to crush them." With the documents in hand, Lucia prepared for battle. However, my parents' lawyer, Mr. Gutierrez, wasn't about to give up so easily. When we presented the scholarship evidence, they responded with a completely new narrative, full of legal maneuvering. Now they claimed they never saw the scholarship notification, that it probably went to their spam folder. They insisted they acted with the information they had and made the best decision possible. Even if I had received significant aid, they said, they provided me with additional support that I morally owed them. It's absurd, Lucia said as she reviewed the response. But in legal terms, it's plausible. They're hiding behind ignorance and good faith. We have to prove that they knew about the scholarship and deliberately chose to hide it. Then I remembered something. My mother, Marta Romero, was a big fan of an online forum for parents called the University Success Network. She spent hours there every night, giving advice, telling family stories, and bragging about being the perfect mother. She had a username she always used, I told Lucia and Tomas. Something like, Proud Mom. It was common to see her writing about college preparation and family achievements. If she ever published anything about your admission to Harvard and mentioned the scholarship, that would be our key piece of evidence, Lucia said. The problem was locating a post from 7 years ago. The buyback machine suggested searching Internet archives. If the forum is still active, there might be saved versions. We spent 3 days digging through archived pages. Lucia even contacted a legal assistant who was an expert in digital forensics. We searched for every possible variation of my mother's username on dozens of college parent forums. And then we struck gold. On a forum called Parents of University Elites, the user Successful Mom Marta had dozens of posts between 2017 and 2019. In a thread titled, When Life Surprises You, posted on April 15, 2018, we found this. What a pleasant surprise. My youngest son was accepted to Harvard with impressive financial aid, 97% covered by merit and need-based scholarships. But honestly, we're steering him toward a state university. Sometimes, as parents, we have to make tough financial decisions with the whole family in mind. My oldest son will need our support in a few years if we can't divide our resources. The youngest is smart enough to excel anywhere. Besides, the state university will keep him humble and close to home. We all won. I read that post 3 times before I fully understood. My own mother had left public evidence of what they had done. And she'd done it to show off to strangers. She wrote that they hid your scholarship to fund Julian, Tomas said, reading from behind me. And on top of that, she painted it as a noble sacrifice. Lucia Mendez was already printing certified copies of the archive page. Here it is, she said, the final straw. In that document, my mother admitted that she was aware of the financial aid package they offered me and that, despite that, she decided to keep it from me. But that wasn't all. The legal assistant found more posts from the very active Ms. Marta Romero. We discovered that my mother had an entire online presence built around her role as a devoted mother who had made great sacrifices for her family. One of those posts, from July 2018, said, Update on our children in college. The youngest is doing very well at the state university. And we are arranging for the oldest to begin his studies in business administration next year. Sometimes you have to think long-term. The money we save on the younger child's education is being redirected to support the older child's social connections. They'll both thank us for it someday. The post included specific details of their financial strategy, mentioning that they had chosen to invest the money they would have used for Harvard in high-yield opportunities that would benefit the entire family in the long run. She was justifying financial fraud as if it were an act of good parenting. And there was more. In December 2020, she wrote another post, explaining how we paid for a private university for our eldest son while our youngest finished at a public one. Easy, smart resource reallocation. Why waste an excellent scholarship when you can invest that money in the child who needs it most? Smart parenting. Family comes first. She even answered another parent's question about whether it was right to hide financial information from children, saying that sometimes protecting your children means making decisions they won't understand until they're older. We didn't tell our youngest son about the financial aid he received because we knew he would feel guilty knowing we used that opportunity to support his brother. My children shouldn't have to carry that burden. Every post was further evidence against them. Not only had they hidden my scholarship, they were proud of it, all while lying to my face. This is enough for us to request sanctions against his lawyer, Lucia said firmly. This is no longer just a family dispute. This is documented fraud. And the most serious thing was that, having used federal financial aid under false statements, federal fraud statutes were triggered. That same night, I received a call. It was Uncle Ernesto. Daniel, I've been thinking about all this, and there's something you should know. A couple of years ago, your father came to ask me for a loan. He told me they had made some bad investment decisions and were in a difficult situation. What kind of investments? He didn't say clearly, but he mentioned cryptocurrencies and some tech stocks that didn't perform as expected. They lost quite a bit of money. I didn't lend him anything because it seemed like gambling debt. And then it all clicked. They hadn't just diverted my money, they'd gambled it away. The lawsuit had nothing to do with principals or family obligations. It was a desperate attempt to recoup their losses. Would you be willing to testify about that conversation? Absolutely. Someone has to hold them accountable. I hung up and looked at Tomas and Lucia. They lost all their money. That's why they're suing me now. They used my scholarship as an investment, squandered it, and now they want me to pay them back. Lucia smiled with determination. Daniel, we're not just going to win this case. We're going to make the whole country know what they did, and not in a good way. After months of legal proceedings, the day of the trial arrived. Lucia made me rehearse my testimony so many times that I could recite it in my sleep. Tomas helped keep me sane by bringing food and drinks to our strategy sessions, always accompanied by some sarcastic comment about the lawyer. That Gutierrez guy seems more like a used car salesman than a lawyer, he said once, while checking the firm's website. I bet you anything he's trying to paint you as an ungrateful millennial who doesn't appreciate his parents' sacrifices. And he wasn't wrong. The room was small but packed. The story had reached the local media with headlines like "Parents Sue Son Over College Expenses" and "Family Dispute Goes to Court." I saw several journalists in the audience, which made me nervous at first, until Lucia reminded me that the media coverage actually worked in our favor. My parents were dressed as if they were attending a funeral. My mother wore a somber black dress, my father his best suit, both acting like grieving parents of a tragedy they themselves had caused. Julian was there too, with an expression of utter discomfort, as if he would rather be anywhere else. Gutierrez's opening speech was pure emotional manipulation. He presented my parents as selfless martyrs who had given everything for their ungrateful children. He used terms like family obligation, moral duty, and basic human decency. Carlos and Marta Romero are exemplary people, he said, gesturing to them theatrically. They did what any loving parents would have done, sacrifice their financial security to ensure their children's future. Now they only ask for justice. Not charity, not pity, but recognition of the effort her son refuses to value. When my mother took the stand, her performance was award-worthy. She wept at precisely the right moments, her voice cracked with pinpoint accuracy, and she played the role of the wounded mother with unsettling skill. We never meant for it to come to this, she whispered, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. We just wanted Daniel to understand what we sacrificed. We postponed our retirement, took on debt, all to give our children the opportunities we never had. Gutierrez saw her through a perfectly rehearsed narrative about the economic difficulties they supposedly faced. An effective performance, though completely false. And then it was our turn. Lucia started with me. She asked me to recount everything, my dreams of studying at Harvard, the intervention in the kitchen where they convinced me to reject the scholarship, the 4 years I felt like a second-class son while Julian lived in luxury. I kept my voice steady and made sure to look the judge directly while I spoke. Mr. Gutierrez's cross-examination was clearly designed to portray me as an ungrateful young man. Mr. Romero, would you like to tell this court that, with your level of intelligence, it never occurred to you to personally verify the most important financial decision of your life? I trusted my parents, I replied calmly. They assured me the aid package wasn't enough, and I believed them because they were my family. How convenient, the lawyer retorted. Now that you've achieved success, do you intend to refuse to give anything back to the people who, according to you, made that success possible? I'm not refusing to reimburse the money that was actually spent on me, I clarified. What I won't do is pay for what they used for other purposes while they deceived me about what was rightfully mine. That's when Lucia Mendez presented Uncle Ernesto as a witness. His testimony was compelling. He spoke without hesitation about my father's constant boasting about his investment losses and his desperate attempts to recover the squandered money. The strength of her statement lay in the fact that she had no reason to lie. She was simply exposing the truth about her own brother's behavior. But the real blow came when Lucia showed posts from a public forum. Your Honor, she said firmly, I want to present evidence from an online forum in which Ms. Marta Romero not only acknowledges knowing about her son's financial aid package, but even states that she deliberately chose to conceal it from him. At that moment, a screen lit up in the courtroom displaying archived screenshots of the forum. Lucia began to read aloud, her tone piercing the room like a knife. My youngest son was accepted to Harvard with an incredible aid package. It covers 97% of his tuition through merit and need-based scholarships. But, to be honest, we're leaning towards a state university. I watched as my mother's face drained of all color. My father glared at her with an expression of uncontrollable fury. Apparently, not even he knew that she had boasted online about such a decision. Mrs. Romero, Lucia continued, unyielding, can you explain to this court why you published that you were hiding a nearly full scholarship for your son while simultaneously claiming you didn't know it existed? My mother's voice began to rise. She was beside herself. I didn't write that. That's false. He owes us everything. But Lucia didn't stop. He produced the financial records and added, we also have evidence that the plaintiffs used funds from Mr. Romero's scholarship to make high-risk investments that resulted in significant losses. This lawsuit isn't about family obligations, but about forcing his son to cover his gambling debts. Silence fell over the courtroom. Even the journalist stopped writing. Lucia showed another screen, my father's Facebook posts where he boasted about his investment gains. Everything coincided with the periods when Harvard would have covered my tuition, but instead the money was being diverted elsewhere. The trial was practically over. The forum had swept everything away, but there was still one last unexpected bombshell. From the back of the courtroom, Julian stood up abruptly. This is crazy, he shouted. I told you this was going to go wrong. Look, Daniel, I knew about Harvard, okay? But what was I supposed to do? Refuse free money? They decided that, not me. The sheriff moved closer to arrest him, but Julian continued. Do you think I wanted to be part of this farce? They threatened to leave me penniless if I didn't support them. But I'm not going to jail for their stupidity. It wasn't an apology. It was Julian who pushed them over the edge to save himself. But that confession completely destroyed what little credibility my parents had left. The judge didn't hesitate to deliver his verdict. Not only did he dismiss the lawsuit, but he also referred the case to the state attorney general for alleged consumer fraud and to the IRS for possible tax evasion. The judge stated firmly, this will not be used as a tool for family blackmail. The plaintiff's conduct constituted a particularly cruel form of emotional and financial abuse. As I left the courthouse, my parents were waiting for me in the hallway. There were no masks left. You've ruined everything, my father whispered, barely containing his anger. Are you happy now? My mother added, venom in her voice. We gave you everything. You owe us. For the first time in my life, I looked at them without fear, without guilt, without that desperate desire to gain their approval. They didn't give me everything, I replied calmly. They stole it from me. And now everyone knows. I turned and walked away, accompanied by Tomas and Lucia, leaving behind those I once called family to face the consequences of their greed. 6 months after the trial, I was in my backyard, sharing drinks with Tomas as we watched the sunset over Austin. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Lucia. I thought you'd want to see this. Attached to the message was a news article with the headline, Local couple faces federal charges in college fraud scheme. It was perfect. The article detailed how my parents had been formally charged with multiple crimes, including wire fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy. The IRS investigation uncovered years of irregularities, not only with the scholarship money but also with false tax returns, unreported income, and other practices that were going to cost them dearly. The federal charges arose because they essentially defrauded the government's financial aid system. When you receive federal funds, you're required to accurately declare your financial situation. But by using my scholarship for personal investments and lying about our family finances, they committed federal fraud. Tomas, reading over my shoulder, made a curt remark. They're going to spend many years in prison. The criminal charges were just the beginning. The civil consequences turned out to be even more satisfactory. Remember those investments my dad was always bragging about on social media? Well, we discovered he'd used my college scholarship money to speculate in high-risk cryptocurrencies and penny stocks. Not only did he lose almost everything, but he also failed to declare the profits to the IRS. The tax penalty alone was well over 6 figures. An online article quoted former neighbors who described how the Romero family flaunted a lifestyle far beyond their means. Expensive cars, frequent trips, designer clothes, all financed with money stolen from their own son's future. They had to sell the house, the very same one where they had lied to me about my education and my future. Julian was evicted from his apartment because they could no longer help him financially. The last I heard of him, he was living in a rundown studio, working at a car dealership, and trying to repair his credit history, which had been tarnished by the fraud scandal. But true justice came from another source, the social one. My mother, Marta Romero, loved cultivating her online image as an exemplary mother. However, local media uncovered her posts on forums and social networks. Screenshots where Seben boasted about hiding his son's scholarship circulated by the thousands online. Her book club friends, her church friends, her yoga partners, they all found out who she really was. The family that had built its reputation around an image of success and affection was exposed for what it was, people capable of betraying their own son out of greed. The guilty pleasure of seeing her mask fall was indescribable. Some of her former book club friends even created a messaging group where they discussed every new scandal. Someone even created a fake account called Exemplary Mom Marta 2025, from which they posted updates about her court appearances and mugshots. Last week, Uncle Ernesto called me to tell me something new. Your father asked me to lend him money to pay his lawyers, he said, laughing. He had the nerve to call me about it. I told him he'd be better off asking Julian for help, since he was the one who benefited the most from his crimes. The irony is that they couldn't even afford a decent defense anymore. They were represented by an overburdened public defender while facing federal prosecutors with every resource and piece of evidence at their disposal. Lucia Mendez, the lawyer who accompanied me throughout this process, estimated that they could receive between 3 and 5 years in federal prison, in addition to having to pay restitution, fines, and civil penalties. Their comfortable middle-class life is over forever. Do you know what's the most ironic thing? Lucia told me in her last call. All of this could have been avoided if they hadn't sued you. If they had remained silent, perhaps they would have gotten away with stealing the scholarship. But their greed blinded them. He was right. If they had accepted that I was doing well and moved on with their lives, would never have discovered what they did with my financial aid at Harvard. But they couldn't resist trying to squeeze every last penny out of their own son. And that greed is what ruined them. Today, my life has completely changed. Winning the lawsuit attracted some media attention, which opened doors for me at more prestigious companies. I accepted an offer in Seattle with a significant salary increase and the possibility of working entirely remotely. I bought a house with a view of the mountains. And I adopted a rescued German Shepherd, whom I named Tan. He's more loyal than my own family ever was. Tomas, a good friend, also moved to Seattle. He got a job at a startup downtown, and we see each other almost every weekend. He always finds a way to remind me how it all started. Do you remember when your biggest worry was whether to choose granite or quartz countertops? She asked me recently. Those were the days, huh? I laughed. And then she asked, but would you change anything? I thought about it for a moment. Would I rather not know what I discovered and continue believing that my parents were simply flawed but well-intentioned people? Would I prefer to live in ignorance? The answer was clear. No way, I told him. The best thing that ever happened to me was discovering who they really were. The final act of justice came last month. I received a call from Harvard's alumni office inviting me to share my story in their magazine. They told me that my case had led to changes in their financial aid communication protocols. Now, students are required to receive information directly, not just their parents. We'd like to include you in our series on stories of overcoming adversity, the editor told me. Your experience demonstrates how education can prevail over family chaos. The article will be published next month. But the most exciting thing came afterward. Harvard offered me the opportunity to complete my degree through their extension program with a full scholarship and additional support to make up for the years they stole from me. I start in the fall. I'll graduate at 27, debt-free, with a Harvard degree and a story that proves that sometimes the best revenge is letting others destroy themselves. 2 years later, I'm back from my Harvard graduation ceremony. Tomas flew to be with me, of course. And Uncle Ernesto was there too, beaming with pride and taking pictures like a father. And my parents? Marta was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison. Carlos received a 2-year sentence. Julian testified in his immunity exchange, which speaks volumes about that family's values. They will eventually be released, but they will be ruined and their reputations destroyed. But it's not my problem anymore. I saw parents. They only saw a business opportunity.